We need to act it today. We cannot wait for tomorrow.
Nobody can do this alone. Early action saves lives. Empowering our women is also a way forward.
Zero dose children should be a priority.
If we work together across boundaries, we know we could eliminate this cancer.
Getting to zero is very possible.
Hi, and welcome to Getting to Zero, a program from the Sabin Vaccine Institute where we interview global health leaders about what it will take to get to zero preventable deaths through the use of vaccines. My name is Nginache Nampota-Nkomba, and I am a physician from Malawi, and I'm currently a PhD student in vaccinology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Today, I have with me one of the leading educators in vaccinology, Dr. Ann Costa Clemens. Ann is a professor of global health, vaccinology, and pediatric infectious diseases at the University of Oxford and the University of Siena, where she heads the Institute for Global Health. With over 25 years of experience, she has contributed to the development of more than 20 globally licensed vaccines and pharmaceutical products. She launched the first master's program in vaccinology at the University of Siena and also teaches at the University of Oxford. I am so delighted to have her here today. Dr. Clemens, thank you so much for coming. You have contributed to the science and development of a large number of vaccines, including the pentavalent vaccine, which is a cornerstone of many countries' childhood immunization programs, including my own, the development of an oral polio vaccine, and you have worked on the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. Your development of a low-cost rotavirus vaccine has, since its licensure, led to an almost 40% decrease in mortality from infant diarrhea disease. You're a pediatrician by training. Tell me what it is that drew you to vaccinology initially.
Thank you for the kind introduction and invitation. Pleasure to be here. I believe it was the perspective of impacting health by preventing disease and consequently lowering the burden on the healthcare system. As a pediatrician, we work in healthcare clinics and hospitals, and we see that the health system is always overcrowded, overwhelmed. And especially in MIC countries, low and middle income countries, working in poor communities, we see that prevention can really contribute to lower this burden. And I think that's why I, very early in life, working with prevention like education, supporting the community in how to get access to clean water, sanitation, and immunization. That triggered me to really invest my career on developing vaccines.
Well, as a clinician from a LMIC myself, I can really relate to that. So in addition to your work developing vaccines, you also created the first master in vaccinology and drug development at the University of Siena at the Institute of Global Health in Italy. The master's program has graduated more than 120 students in a little over a decade, including myself. I am a proud alumni of the program. So what drove you to focus on developing the next generation of vaccinologists?
Well, it was, I think what really triggered that was meeting with Mr. Nelson Mandela in South Africa. We were in a meeting financing vaccination to every child. And at that time, I was already working with vaccine development, and we could see that there was a lack of qualified professionals that had an understanding on vaccine or product development from end to end. And we really need critical mass for this and broader understanding. And during that meeting, when Mr. Mandela was really stating that, it's great that we finance, but we need to leave a legacy. And this legacy is education. We cannot just go to certain regions, certain countries, and do development and then go back to wherever we came from. So, and I am a physician, I am a scientist, but above all, I am a professor, an educator. So I really believe, and I quote his words, that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. And also, immunization is one of the most cost-effective tools in public health. So I didn't need to think much to put these two things together and work hard in order to create something that would be proper, high quality education, because just an update course does not really do a responsible capacity building for the healthcare professionals, researchers, and scientists. So we need a proper training and a degree, because this degree will also change your lives, people like you, healthcare professionals like you, because this adds a lot to your career and to your future development.
Well, yeah, and I really appreciate that you are somebody who believes in vaccine equity and you're a strong advocate for vaccine equity, especially in low and middle income countries. From your perspective, how can training programs like the one you develop help close the gap in vaccine access and decision-making powers in these regions?
Well, I can quote you when I interviewed you. You said you wanted to be one of the first female investigators in your country. Enhancing knowledge and connecting people, broadening the network, and again, creating critical mass, but qualified mass to work on this. So our alumni, and we really teach from end to end, from vaccine design and construct up to immunization, which goes through the entire development, licensing, but also access, because once you have the product, that doesn't mean anything. What is the value of the vaccine? So it's immunization. If the vaccine is not in our arms or our oral, if it's in case of oral vaccine or nasal vaccine, it doesn't have any impact. And our alumni, they are basically working and making a difference, like you, working in Ministry of Health for their countries where decision making is taken, regulatory affairs, industry, but also supranational organizations where strategies for public health involving immunization, equity, and access, but also information is being taken to help LMIC countries. So we are very proud of contributing to this and see that our students are surpassing the teachers.
Yes, and I am definitely well on my way to being the first female PI conducting clinical trials. I am almost there. And it's really nice. It's nice to hear that the alumni are doing a broad spectrum of work in the field of vaccinology. So the COVID-19 pandemic revealed both the strengths and the vulnerabilities of global vaccine development and delivery systems. What lessons have you drawn from that experience, and how are those insights shaping how we train and preparing the future global health of professionals?
I worked on the development of 3 COVID vaccines while I was also leading site readiness. I was a PI for the Gates Foundation. So we trained and equipped and qualified personnel in 22 countries, 22 sites in 7 countries in Latin America during COVID. So we mapped the gaps, and one of the gaps is exactly this, is site readiness, and how to keep the sites warm, because the next epidemic and pandemic will come. Is not if, but it's when. And we need to have sites warm to answer quickly to this healthcare issue. We also need laboratory for clinical trials assays. We could see that the laboratory for clinical trials assays, they are concentrated in US, in Europe. And this increases a lot the budget and takes a lot of time to get the samples analyzed. Only the shipment increases a lot the budget. Moreover, we have a lot of losses with the sample sizes too. Another big point is the integration of the regulatory affairs, the regulatory agencies, very early in the development. Regulatory was something that really was seen, I would say, for the first time for the development of a product and the importance of it. Another big point is communication, the fake news and etc., and how to communicate to the public, because it doesn't help if we bring a vaccine to licensure and it doesn't reach the population. And communication is a key factor. So we need to know how to reach the target groups and that they get the benefit of it, right? So we need to be able to answer their questions. Another key point we mapped is manufacturing. Since very long, manufacturing, and I also work for the Gates Foundation as a senior consultant, we have been talking about expanding manufacturing to other regions, but it never really kicked off. And now it's kicking off, especially because of the monopoly of the drug substance also. We really need to think how we evolve from now on.
So, since COVID-19 and even in the current landscape, has interest in vaccinology grown in your perspective, or do you think it's getting harder to find scientists who want to devote time and focus to vaccinology?
Well, that's a very complex question. Vaccinology is a big word and field, but I think the researchers, yes, I think the interest has grown, point number one, but in different fields, because it also depends on financing. So you need to have sustainable funding to do something, and that has to do with your interest, right? The researcher interest. We are in a moment right now in the world where there is a big cut of funding. So, but we still can see that post-COVID in MIC countries, the private sector, they really woke up for vaccine development. Usually, in MIC countries, the vaccine production comes from the governments. So, right. So, and the private sector really invests in drug development and generics. Now there is a huge interest, and that really stimulates, promotes also the researchers, let's say, development and interest. Another point that I think that really changed quite a lot was the interest within the vaccinology on regulatory affairs. So there are I think it's the first time that regulatory is seen as part of a drug development, not only for the licensing of a drug development. And the early involvement is very important. And therefore, we are very happy that we have many students here in Siena that come with interest in the regulatory field, because you really need to understand about the full development in order to approve protocols, clinical trials, and approve later on the vaccine itself, and do the pharmacovigilance, because the development do not stop with the licensure of the product. Another point where the interest grew a lot is having the end in mind, how you overcome the translational science, translational development, how you impact, how you take your product from the bench and bring it to the population. Before, I saw a lot of researchers, and I have PhD students here in Siena and in Oxford, where they really do science by science. They don't think about the impact, how this molecule will impact lives, will save lives, improve the quality of lives, and don't put a time frame on it. Therefore, you don't see an impact. And I think this has changed. So the researchers, they come more, with the idea of translational development, translational science, and how they reach the population, and they understand that generating evidence is part of it. And also this will help with public health policies, which really drives the use of the product.
I could already pick up from what you were saying some of the key skills that you believe that vaccinologists are using and need to grow in their careers. But I just want you to tell me a little bit more about that. What sort of skills and what type of science is going to be most important to vaccinologists of the future? So what would you advise new vaccinologists to study? And what skills or perspectives do you think are most essential right now?
AI is a key aspect in vaccine development. We do have first vaccine construct created by AI. So via the Institute of Protein Design. So deep learning how AI can support vaccine development from the vaccine construct, from protein design, but also shorten the clinical trial development, how this also impacts in monitoring, regulatory, and supporting the healthcare systems. So I wouldn't say this years ago, but post-COVID, I would say that is top one. And that is a tool that the majority of us still don't know how to use it, right? And we need to really identify where to use, how to use, but always needs to be supervised by humans. And we need to adjust ourselves and our new, let's say, way of working with AI. Secondly, deeper understanding of immunology, because that is driving the path for the new platforms that we are using in vaccine development. And I would say data generation, data, because yes, what drives a product, the interest of a private company or a biotech or academia is data. You need to prove that there is disease, and you need to know how to collect data, and not only data on the disease, but also on the pharmacovigilance, on the product use afterwards. And what we could see during COVID is that there's lots of data out there, but people don't know how to collect, and therefore you cannot pull it, you don't know how to use it. And whatever outcome you get here, it's not really usable for the other countries. So it's how to collect data, how to analyze, and then how to use this data to, new vaccine development, new indication, new schedule, booster need, and policy making.
Those sound very important. I'm glad that at least I am participating in the data part where I formally am learning how to utilize existing data to drive new science in vaccinology. So as a final question for our viewers who are watching you, who are as inspired by your career as me, we just want to know, what lessons would you share with us young professionals who aspire to follow in your footsteps?
The very basic one is that you love what you do. Whatever you select to do, you really need to love that, because that will be for the rest of your life. And then it's just part of your life. It's not a burden on your day to day. And then one needs to focus. We need to be experts in something. You need to find the niche of your expertise and then focus. And that will drive really your success. The selection of good mentors. To have good mentors is very important because we need to be humble. We don't know it all. And we are always ready to learn. And I would say there is always something to do, something to study, because I like always to mention, Harmonica, how there are not exhausted topics or subjects, but researchers exhausted in the topics.
Wow, that's so inspiring. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for sharing your insights from your very vast experience and from your very successful career. And thank you for your advice for those of us who are trying to follow in your footsteps.
Thank you for the kind invitation. It's my pleasure to be interviewed by you. And definitely, I'd like to be there for the first female investigator trial. So just invite me because I will be there. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.